When it comes to money in the workplace, we've heard the stat. Women make just 79 cents to the dollar compared to men, and the gap is even worse for women of color. But when women have conversations about equal pay, a lot of times we still don't really say what we want to. We hold back, which got me thinking, why?
Why don't we have these conversations about money in a very honest way? And what happens when we do start to talk to one another openly about getting what we deserve? It is interesting.
So we tried it.
Like now in my group text I have with my siblings, we just talk about stocks all the time.
This was the first time the four of us here had ever met. Lauren works in law. Ashley is in medicine.
You may need to add me to that group chat.
I do see the group chat.
And Cassandra works in HR at a nonprofit. All very different industries, but we quickly found out there was a very similar aversion when it came to talking about cold hard cash.
You have to figure out like your 401k. You're just really like, I don't know what any of this means.
So that's where our conversation started.
Why don't we talk about money?
I think because we've never been taught to talk about money. It's kind of like the dirty secret or the taboo. You don't talk about money, especially as a woman.
I think that definitely ties in to how our society has been for quite some time. Whether it's you either don't ask for what you want or whatever you receive is good enough. With my first grown-up job, it was an internship that turned into a position, and I think I was just so grateful for quite some time that I never really asked for any additional funds or any additional salary. And then there came a point where I realized that the weight that I held in that organization was really quite heavy, and it wasn't reflective in how they were treating me in terms of a salary.
When was the first time that you guys heard about even the phrase the wage gap or the pay gap?
In grad school is definitely something that we talked about a lot, about, what our futures are going to look like and what we need to keep in mind, because, the wage gap is real and oftentimes it's not spoken about.
For medicine, you're thinking about the specialties that you're going into, and that's where you can both see gender norms play out very clearly and kind of what people are factoring in as far as their specialty choice. And also that was very clearly the first time that I had female mentors mention to me that every step of the way, this is something that you need to both acknowledge and think about and think of how you're going to try and navigate it.
One of my friends, she just started a new job, and she said it was the first time she'd actually had another woman talk about salary with her. That is the one that I think we're all very secretive about. And I'm just wondering, why? Why is it still, we feel like we can't disclose our salaries?
I think especially if you're in an advanced career where you might make more than some of your peers, then it feels like maybe that you're bragging. And I think we all have a lot of assumptions of like what this job title and what this salary might be. And reality is, especially if you're in a field like law or like medicine, it's such a wide range, and it can get you in a lot of trouble asking those questions.
It's nearly impossible to have a serious conversation about money in women's careers without bringing up this idea: motherhood. According to the National Women's Law Center, moms working full-time are hit with an even bigger wage gap, earning just 71 cents to every dollar cashed in by working dads, leaving many parents in the workplace with some tough choices and conversations.
If you're trying to make a woman, or really anyone, decide between their family or their career, most people are probably going to pick their family, especially if they have the means to pick their family. So yes, I'm going to pick the job that's maybe not more prestigious, but still puts food on the table.
So it's like the work-life balance,
Right.
Which is, I think, the thing we all hate being asked, but
But it's real. It is very true.
One thing that's not often acknowledged in the gender pay gap discussion is you need better work-life balance for males as well. Because if you don't have a partner who you start a family with who has some degree of flexibility at home, once you get to the point of having children, there's this third job at home. And if one career has the flexibility to be able to contribute and one career doesn't, then of course, like you said, no one's gonna, choose to just offload as much as they can, and at some point want to be able to contribute. So I think it's important to think about work-life balance from both genders, and that I think in a long-term view would then help address the gender pay gap.
When you're talking about money, that discussion with both your partner or significant other and how you make that balance too, I found for me, that was a conversation that was really hard to have with my husband, where it's like, we're putting everything together, but like, I make more money than him, you know? And it is like a tough line to, you know, kind of walk. Have you guys had to have those types of conversations, and, you know, how did you approach them?
This is a generalization, but people automatically assume when you're married and you're in a heterosexual couple that the male makes more money, right? And I think that that plays into negotiation discussions, into promotion discussions, and that comes up in family discussions where it feels like your career is supplemental, especially in older generations who are like, oh wow, that's great that, you know, you're a physician, but you know, it's really nice that your husband has a career that can be the breadwinner. And that's not the case in our family. We're both equally contributing.
So you brought up negotiating, and I do think there's a lot of stereotypes around it where they say women aren't good at negotiating and that's why they can't get, you know, the money they want. What has you all's experience been with going to the negotiating table or asking for a raise or kind of battling for yourself?
I think advocating for yourself is always going to be difficult no matter who you are. I mean, even with a law degree, like it's my job to advocate, but for other people, not for myself. So it creates this dynamic of if you've never been taught to advocate for yourself, then how do you go in, especially in a high stress environment, and then do it?
Have you ever had to do that?
I have. And it's always awkward. And it always feels like, did I do the right thing? Did I ask for too much? Did I ask for too little? And again, there is no blueprint. When I was getting my first job out of law school, I did negotiate, but I felt like I didn't negotiate enough. I asked for the like soft sell, where it wasn't necessarily salary, but it was like, you know, well, I have professional development. And then I went to a women's law conference, and one woman said something that I hadn't heard in really ever, and she said, ask for the money. Like, that is what matters. The dollar is what matters. And yes, you can ask for the intangible things, but the dollar amount is what matters. That's what pays your bills. That's what's going to set you up. And when you're ready to leave, you're actually able to. That is what really matters.
Asking for money isn't really easy. And at the bargaining table, a 2019 Glassdoor study found that 42% of women didn't negotiate at all in their current or most recent job.
Negotiating anything is really difficult, and you think that if you even move the needle a little bit, you're like, yes, like I got this, like I did this. And then you go and talk to a male counterpart and he's just kind of like, that's cool that you got your little like $2,000. So have you guys ever had to talk to male counterparts, and has there ever been an instance where you knew someone on your team that was a male that was maybe less senior than you was making more money than you?
I didn't know, but I kind of felt that someone was making more money. Like, you know how sometimes you can just tell. And for me, it was frustrating because I had actually been there a lot longer. And I knew my potential. I knew what I was bringing to the table. And so it was really difficult to navigate that aspect of knowing that you are just as valuable to the organization, if not more valuable, and just realizing that I need to actually vocalize what I want and not be ashamed of it either.
I'm within academic medicine. I'm a part of a university. And so in that setting, I feel like it's a great setup for salary transparency. In each level has made it transparent to say, this is the salary, this is the additional compensation for bonus that you can get based on these factors. And that really took away a lot of the feeling that as a female, that if I was going to the table, was I getting something different than if someone was hiring a male colleague.
At your current state of where you are, you can say, you know, agree or disagree. You believe you are making the salary or the dollar amount that you deserve.
Disagree. I'm currently in the negotiating process, so disagree. Really what I've been trying to do is look in the mirror and look within myself, and whatever number comes to my mind, that's the one I'm going with, but also still trying to be open to what's feasible for them to provide me.
Cash is king, and yet women and men's experiences trying to get it can be very different. When it comes to asking for a raise, a 2018 pay scale survey found some pretty glaring reasons why women stayed quiet. Either they felt uncomfortable, or they didn't think they'd been there long enough. Meanwhile, those same men stayed quiet because they either had the salary they wanted, or had gotten a raise without even asking.
I think a lot of times we think so much about what the company thinks of us when we come to the negotiating stage, where we're like, make ourselves a little smaller. I've talked to more senior women in like places I worked, and they're just like, look, like, go get yours, don't worry about these companies at the end of the day. Like, you have to take care of yourself. Flipping that mentality for me was a really big struggle. But once I started thinking that, it's like, that person's right. Would a guy do the same thing? Would they say, this company's done so much for me, so I shouldn't like ask for this raise?
Right. I think that also has a lot to do with representation. Yeah. When you're in a culture, in a company, whatever it may be, where you're not talking to a boss that looks like you, whether it be your color or your gender, and saying, I'm asking you for something and I feel like I'm new to this type of environment. I'm in pediatrics, where I feel fortunate that my bosses are often female, and that changes the conversation when you go to them. And it's important, I think, from our standpoint when we're negotiating and advocating for ourselves, to remember the gender pay gap and say, we need to go in and ask for maybe even a little more than we think.
And I had someone tell me a while ago, when you're at the negotiating point of the process, the hiring process or the promotion process, they already want you. So they're not gonna go back and re-look at applications. So you really do have the upper hand. Having that mentality, I think, changes the dynamics of negotiating.
To be quite honest, this conversation is helping me quite a bit in navigating this negotiating that I have to do.
So what advice would you give to other young women that want to have conversations about money, don't know how to approach it? What's like the best piece of advice you guys have gotten when it comes to money?
Having female advocates who are kind of one step ahead of you. People have put themselves out there when I've been going through the hiring process to say, this is what I'm making, this is what my contract looks like, these are the things you should be asking about, to a granular level.
And I think that's something we don't do, especially as women, enough. We think, especially if you're in a higher position, there can only be one. And so we have to like keep it to ourselves. It's like, no, there should be more than one. And if we talk amongst ourselves, maybe we can actually create a change.